firmly believe that the discussion will be interesting and interactive one.
I have already mentioned Dr. Steve Wolf and Dr. Rishra. So, sir, now it is over to you. You can start the program.
Thank you very much, and good evening to all. I would like to welcome all of you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. So, first of all, I would like to thank, this is my special gratitude to the Business Center College for providing me this opportunity to be here in this occasion. And I myself, Mohammad Mujahidul Islam, I work for the Jahangir University in the Department of History. My expertise in the field of international relations and political science. And I am here with you as a moderator this evening. And there is a very exciting evening planned, including what I know will be a wonderful lectures from Dr. Siegfried Wolf as well as Dr. Shubhasra Mishra. And in this program today, as you know, our topic of discussion is basically the state-sponsored terrorism in South Asia. So, in this program, basically, as we have to be very much consider careful about time, therefore, I would like to allocate time for each of the speakers is about between 30 to 35 minutes, and after that, the audience will have the scope to ask some questions if they have. Then we have this chat box over there in this webinar, and those who are interested to raise any questions to any specific speaker, they could raise these questions. And regarding the topic, as you know, this topic is a very timely and a very important topic, basically. So this is timely because it's not about like today, over the last 2-3 decades in South Asian context. The matter of this state-sponsored terrorism is one of the very burning issues to understand the bilateral and multilateral relations in South Asia. And it is also very important because we have to understand several things in a different way. Because the topic today what we are going to discuss is widely discussed, but there is always problem regarding the understanding of the concept state-sponsored terrorism itself. It is important because there is no denying the fact that the USA government list of state sponsor of terrorism is dated, politicized, analytically muddy, and in general not useful for distinguishing which states truly sponsor terrorism and how aggressively they do so. Therefore, here is the option and opportunity for us to come up with some new ideas, understanding about the state-sponsored terrorism in the context of South Asia, and how could we conceptualize in the context of region as well as in the context of the contemporary global politics, with a special reference to the South Asian politics. Therefore, this would be, I believe, a wonderful discussion. It would be a wonderful evening. So, in this occasion, I would like to welcome Dr. Siegfried Wolf to deliver this speech, followed by Dr. Shubhasra Mishra. So, may I request now Dr. Siegfried Wolf to begin his presentation. Siegfried, you muted. Would you please unmute your mic?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, it's a great pleasure and honor for me to meet you again, this time virtually. And I have Jahangir University, great memory from a field. I, as a terrorist, is a Pakistani citizen of Pakistani origin, or has supporters and contacts in Pakistan. Besides being in the West country brought terrorism as a place offering safe havens for terrorists, Pakistan is not on the West list of governments involved in state-sponsored terrorism. However, the charge sheet against the South Asian country is a long one. Regarding Daniel Byman, the director of the Center for Peace and Security Studies at Georgetown University and the senior fellow at Brookings Institution, points out that along with Iran, Pakistan is one of the most active sponsors of terrorism worldwide. International experts are confirming that the country is not only flirting with jihadism, but has also using terrorism as an instrument of state policy for decades. Moreover, these claims are backed by Pakistani elites themselves. For example, former President Asaf Zardari publicly admitted that the country deliberately created and nurtured terrorist groups such as Lashkar-e-Toiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed as a policy to achieve short-term tactical objectives. Having said this, the following arguments can be put forward. State terrorism should be included in the study of terrorism. Here one must make the case that the notion that only non-state actors employ terrorism has to be rejected. In other words, states can be terrorists too. Pakistan must be identified as a state which systematically sponsors terrorism. Here the phenomenon of state terrorism in Pakistan stems from the failed defects in the country's political and administrative system in general and the unhealthy civil-military relations in particular. These structural issues prevent the consolidation of any type of democratic reform or governance. More so, it paves the way for an uncontrolled, legitimate use of force and many types of state terrorism. The sponsorship of terrorism is getting supported by military as well as civilian governments and elites as well. This we have to keep in mind. And not only the military, the civil sector, it's also civilians. Before looking into the case of Pakistan's sponsorship of terrorism, it is crucial to point out some essential conceptual considerations on state terrorism. Despite the fact that there is no consensus on what defines state terrorism, experts identify some key characteristics or indicators for state terrorism, many of them using Pakistan as an empirical point of reference. First, state terrorism is offensive. So what this means? This means there must be a threat of violence or the deliberate action against individuals that the state must protect. The creation of an environment of fear through threat or the implicit connection between the state and the terrorist attack. The second point which you have to highlight is that the act of state terrorism must be perpetrated by actors on behalf of or in conjunction with the state. Actions by state employees in unofficial capacity, like personnel off duty or on leave, but with tacit approval, are included in the scope of state terrorism. Subsequently, proxies as well as agents can be involved in a variety of private, non-state groups who operate as individuals carrying out acts of state terrorism. Third, state terrorism is the policy of using acts involving inspiring great fear as a method of ruling. As such, the act or threat of violence is intended to induce extreme fear among the targets, as well as observers who identify with the victim. In order to spread fear effectively, conducting public acts is an important instrument in the success of state terrorism. context, violence is not solely geared towards the eradication of enemies of the state, but as a means to produce fear. First, state terrorism must be understood as a strategy of political violence containing a clear political motive, namely the desire to change the status quo. As such, the political objective can be an attempt to maintain a regime. Fifth, state terrorism is usually planned and implemented in secret, especially in nations where the government uses terror to maintain power and control. This secret or clandestine state terrorism is a form of covert action that consists of direct participation by state agents in acts of terrorism. However, state terror also takes overt forms. Secrecy, which is naturally accompanied by unpredictability, offers governments the opportunity to deny the involvement, responsibility, and ignorance, or of downplaying state terrorism. Sixth, state terrorism is systematically organized and should be seen as a concerted campaign of violence and not a mosaic of random or unrelated events or sporadic random acts of terror. Seven, state terrorism is usually marked as an extraordinary brutality. It's supposed to generate level of fear among its targets and those operating in a similar environment, filling those identified as victims with despair or persuading them to obey or comply. Furthermore, not all acts of repression or use of violence are illegal nor necessarily qualified as terrorism. However, when state action is excessive, meaning extraordinary brutal, but also used against unarmed, innocent civilians, it qualifies as terrorism. And my last point, intentional targeting of civilians is a significant feature of both non-state and state terrorism. As such, victims of state terrorism are unarmed, unorganized, and therefore unable to deal with or withstand the aggression. In many cases, members of political opposition and critical writers and thinkers are targets of state terrorism. Here, the state may have multiple objectives. Foremost, to eliminate opponents while simultaneously sending a message to other current and future critics. In other words, the ultimate target is not necessarily the actual victim of aggression, but a wider audience of potential victims. Against this backdrop, it is most important to emphasize that government use terrorism both domestically and across state boundaries, involving a large repertoire of repressive tactics. In practice, state and non-state actors employ similar strategies and use violence in a near identical way. Basically, the range of state terrorism covers the following broad types: hosting military support, financial assistance, endorsing repression, intimidation, human rights abuses, or the promotion of crime terror networks. The latter is especially used in the context of creating additional funds for terrorist activities. Examples: illegal trade, arms, and drugs. More concretely, these types of state-sponsored terrorism can be found in measures such as providing arms, explosives, services like financial and purchases, training facilities, and military expertise, safe havens, bases for operations, qualified documents like the personal identification cards and travel time we can identify here the following main areas in which Pakistan sponsors and uses terrorism as an instrument, because now we have to bridge theory and practices context. India, especially within the state of Jammu and Kashmir, Afghanistan, Pakistan provinces, areas under Pakistani control, namely Gilgit-Baltistan, and the area called Azad Jammu and Kashmir from Pakistan. Due to the time constraints today, now, but hopefully we can talk later more about it, I will only share some of my views on Pakistan's cross-border terrorist activities against India. Since its independence in 1947, India has faced violent resistance ranging from left-wing guerrillas and fundamentalist Islamist terrorists to internal ethnic insurgencies. Many of the terrorists were either sent directly by Pakistan or intelligence services had handled. Generally, Pakistan is involved in 3 different types of state terrorism in India. First, it supports insurgency and separatist movements all over India. Secondly, the government also supports cross-border terrorism from Pakistani-based terrorist groups and other militant organizations. The latter includes also Pakistani and other terrorist groups operating in India's non-Pakistani neighborhood. Thirdly, Pakistan supports domestic terrorism in the form of Indian-based terror groups. It is important to note that Pakistan did not only use proxies, but also state actors for terrorist activities in India. These actors and proxies are getting orders, and as such they are acting on behalf of the state. In this context, the role of Pakistan in terrorist incidents in India are matching all the before-mentioned indicators of state-sponsored terrorism. The Pakistani state is known to create informal alliances with and between terrorist organizations and occasionally unites them. One example is the United Chaired Council coalition of militant terror groups fighting the Indian administration of Kashmir some years ago. The fact that such groups can infiltrate and or integrate in the society in Kashmir and were able to carry out such kind of attacks creates extraordinary fear among those who feel they can fall victim to this silence at any random time. But Pakistan is sponsoring terrorism is no longer a secret. Due to the distorted interpretation of its foreign relations and subsequent justification. Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan suggests that he was a victim rather than an aggressor. This clarification of jihadism and international terrorism was not just a slip of the tongue. The fact that there is no official clarification from the Prime Minister office nor a public comment by the country's powerful military reveals that the remark indeed reflects a view held by most of the country's leading political decision makers. Even more, it is a confirmation of the military's official policy, of the national political leadership inclinations, and that of relevant state institutions. This is already well known. But what is new is, however, is that such statements are proclaimed publicly and in the national parliament. Khan's statement in an open and blank confirmation that Pakistan continues to use jihadism, state terror, and cross-border terrorism as a tool in both domestic and foreign policies. Prime Minister Khan would not make such a statement without being assured to be backed by security sector agents. Foremost, Army and intelligence service ISI. Those who traditionally function as the main sponsor of Afghan Taliban and numerous other jihadi groups. As such, a narrative holding that Pakistan is a victim and persecutor of terrorism is clearly undermined. I can't state that. It must be rigorously rejected, at least from my point of view. Overall, this is unfortunate because Pakistan policy poses a challenge to secure and stability in the region and presents huge risk for its own people. The country's political and military leadership are unwilling to fully break the patterns involved in state terrorism, despite the fact that the country's security agents are losing control of many of the schools. The tremendous losses of human life and that result from this rising lack of control, the economic losses and overall deplorable quality of life in Pakistan are some of the worst consequences. As such, we must state that Pakistan is one of the most active sponsors, continues to be one of the most active sponsors of terrorism in South Asia. International experts confirm that the country not only flirts with jihadists, but has in fact used terrorism as an instrument of state policy for decades. Until now, Islamabad has rejected all such accusations. However, its support of the Taliban and the glorification of Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda leaves little to no doubt. Pakistan must be identified as a state which persistently and systematically sponsors terrorism. It is crucial to encourage that Pakistan will not change its policy regarding the use of jihadi groups and their ideology, even as it tries to reassure the international community that it is ready for drastic transformation as indicated before. Islamabad policy possesses a challenge to security and stability in the region as large and presents issues for people living in areas under control of Pakistan authorities. It is time for the international community to acknowledge Pakistan as a major part of the problem and not a credible partner when it comes to tackling the problem of jihadism and cross-border terrorism in South Asia. Prime Minister Khan just provided an incontrovertible artifact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip, very much for wonderful presentation and very informative. We have lots of questions and some of them are very happy to have you here. It was fantastic discussion. And I would like to get back to you after the presentation of Dr. Saurabh Rishra. I think it would be better for us to go one after another and then we can go back for the question and answer session. So now may I request Dr. Saurabh Rishra. Dr. Saurabh Rishra is an assistant professor of MIT Institute for Defense and Strategic Studies, Noida. So will you please begin your presentation?
Thank you, Dr. Muzahidul Islam, for the opportunity and invitation. And I also thank Dr. Prashant Kumar Sharma and Principal Vidhan Chandra College for giving me this platform to express my views on such an important topic on which just Dr. Bull deliberated in details. Actually, he has simplified my job and task by giving a detailed account of what, critical account of what state terror and what Pakistan is doing in the region. So, in fact, from my perspective, if I want to actually deliberate on the theoretical understandings of Islam, are you saying something? It's okay. So, from my perspective, conceptual perspective, I actually try to differentiate between state terror and state-sponsored terrorism, because state terror has a direct meaning or these kind of reflection of state agency directly affecting its own people or some other people. Maybe the meaning is like means technically it's a direct representation of state terror by the state. But state-sponsored terrorism actually is regarded in non-state actors that are being sponsored by states within from its territory or outside its territory for achieving some political, geopolitical, or various kinds of goals, as Professor Wolf described on and on. So, even in that background, if we look at the South Asian region, of course, there are the semblance of or the examples of state-sponsored terrorism, primarily in terms of Pakistani terror. But there are other examples as well, although small. As if we look at the history of India's northeast, we find that there is a kind of state involvement, and in fact, to name Chinese involvement in the northeastern region of India. And if we also look into the southern part of India, I think India itself has been accused of supporting LTTE in Sri Lanka, although the relationship, if there was any, was evidently abolished, or it could not sustain after when Prabhakaran went against the Indian system and assassinated Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. But there is a difference between India's engagement with kind of organizations like LTTE and Pakistani sponsorship of terror, of agents of terror in the region. In fact, we can see traces of Pakistani contact everywhere in South Asia, even beyond South Asia and Southeast Asian region, if we want to trace it actually. But my presentation will be focusing on here at the moment, begin with, is I'm actually trying to go into the causes of state-sponsored terrorism in South Asia, specifically Pakistan, because Chinese role has dissipated or become almost negligible given India's engagement with China in 1980s, late 1980s. But there is a kind of concern again, given the geopolitical changes that we are looking at the contemporary times, when we are looking at these contemporary times. So there's a huge and long history behind the state terrorism, primarily in Pakistan. And I'll pick up from the Cold War period, because US and the European involvement in the region comes very prominently when we actually look for how Pakistan became a great sponsor of terrorism in the region. This is all about the history of the Afghan invasion of Afghanistan by USSR in 1979, and then US CIA response and the Western response to the communist bloc, specifically USSR, to specify here, in terms of non-traditional combat to the USSR forces in Afghanistan. So the raising of Mujahideen, various other militias, Islamic ideological based militias within Pakistan, through CIA money, through Western alliances that were coming in Pakistan, actually emboldened and gave Pakistan as the confidence to use this as a state policy, or terrorism as a state policy. In Afghanistan, almost for a decade, when it ended in with the withdrawal of USSR and the victory of the so-called Mujahideens and the terror organization in Afghanistan, this was the moment when actually Pakistan spread its tentacles within South Asia, specifically targeted towards India. And this we can see in 1989 onwards, actually is the age or beginning of the emergence of Pakistan as the true epicenter of terrorism in South Asia. Because now it was left onto itself, and Cold War was about to end, and it actually had a great experience, almost 10 years experience of sponsoring terrorism in other states, the non-state actors. And the success emboldened Pakistan to actually go for the policy of 1,000 cuts in India and take a revenge of 1971, in which actually Bangladesh got independence from Pakistan. So this is the reason why Pakistan, emboldened by Western support and the success in Afghanistan, became a fulcrum or epicenter of state-sponsored terrorism in South Asia. So, so the whole geopolitics of Cold War was responsible for that. And even after Cold War, after the evaluation of the geopolitical realities, the United States and the Western alliance could not actually withdraw support from Pakistan, given its geopolitical situation and its importance to keep an eye on the whole region, because India was untrusted, given the whole history of ups and downs during the Cold War period. And India, and this remained till India actually recalibrated its foreign policy and had kind of a positive, started giving positive signals to the West, or specifically to say United States itself. So this is the history behind the emergence of state-sponsored terrorism in South Asia. And of course, then this Islamic global terror also comes up in the late 90s and early 2000s. And India, when it suffered the state sponsorship of terrorism and kind of in 1993 attack, again there was a great role played by Pakistan, which Dawood Ibrahim was actually responsible for 1993 blast in Mumbai, the blast that had happened. That actually changed the dynamics from Kashmir, which was based on Islamic sentiment, actually was limited for India. But from 1993 onwards, other parts of India also started experiencing the pain inflicted by state-sponsored terrorism by Pakistan. Yes, of course, there were internal situations and internal politics responsible when those sentiments were, means there was kind of fragmentation, sentimental fragmentation within India. So Pakistan used that, but that was the point when it actually started spreading its tentacles in other parts of India in 2001. And from that point onwards, in 1993 onwards, India at great pain was trying to put forth its position in United Nations and other platforms of the world to recognize state-sponsored terrorism, to recognize Pakistan as a terrorist state, or designate Pakistan as a terrorist state, but it was not being successful. Even when it has actually proposed the International Convention on Terrorism in the United Nations, it is facing great difficulties with respect to the definition of terrorism itself, because again, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter here. So all these dynamics are involved with a great extent. Thankfully for Pakistan, the geopolitical conditions have always remained in its favor. In 1990s, this is non-reliability of India, the US and India relationship, because it was gradually getting momentum. By the end of 1990s, it was on track that India was open towards the Western alliances and Western countries, specifically the United States. So what we see through this
WhatsApp
is, the Gulf War and the 2001 9/11 attack from where Professor Dr. Wolf Beggins actually changed sentiments about terrorism or recognition of terrorism suddenly comes up in the international community because US was infected with a great means the terror attack. So this is the turning point from where actually the special status of Pakistan, which it was enjoying through the whole Cold War period, starts changing. And some kind of pressure comes up on Pakistan to deliver, means to work against terrorism.
মেসেজ পাঠালে উত্তর দেবে কি দেবে না তার
Pressures coming up on Pakistan here, but not
সময় তো হয়ে গেছে মাত্র
sufficient
47
because again geopolitical conditions are working in its favor with respect to the Afghan operations that happened in
কথা বল তার মানে কিছু না
after
নেতাদের ক্লাসটা ফোন অ্যাড করো
9/11 attacks. The Americans wanted the route which was provided by Pakistan destroyed.
আর হোয়াটসঅ্যাপ নম্বরে ফোন করো যার নাম্বার আছে গ্রুপের যে নাম্বার আছে
Easiest route that
তাকে ফোন করে জানি তখন
supplies
না পারলে আমাকে তো আমি ফোন করি
for this coalition of the willing in Afghanistan. So that importance of Pakistan remains despite the fury and rage that even that US has expressed about the involvement of and the sponsorship of terrorism in Pakistan. It has not been able to put desired amounts of pressure, or even it has not been able to represent Pakistan as a terrorist state. Neither in UN it is possible, nor in its own statutes and laws that it has designed for such states. In fact, those states are there enlisted in list as terrorist states. They are Iran, North Korea, Syria, and one more by Sudan. These are the four states, and Pakistan may fit nowhere. Even through the committees like Financial Action Task Force, proper pressure is not being put upon Pakistan.
এই যে ডান্স ক্লাস আছে তো
Geopolitics.
এটা ফোন করেছো তো
Pakistan is needed for
কাকে লিখেছো এটা
Afghan negotiations, Afghan peace talks that is going on and happening in its northern side. So, for geopolitical reasons, Pakistan has always been important for the West for one or the other reasons, and the emergence of China as one of the other supporter of Pakistan for again geopolitical shifts and changes with regard to the CPEC project or with regard to its influence in the northern Indian Ocean and the state of Hormuz and all. So, and because Chinese are also looking for its geopolitical advantages and new routes to exploit near future. Even the rising importance of Pakistan from China. Despite US has taken several steps like suspension of this defense assistance and this ending of the training program, educational program, etc. And Trump's overt tweets. Yes, it is not being able to put the kind of proper pressure that is required to deal with Pakistan's sponsored terrorism in the whole region. And now we can see new sites of Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. Like in the Myanmar, they are actually, there are evidences actually that Rohingyas are being trained, Rohingyas terror outfits are being trained by Pakistani agencies. So, despite we are hoping that it will end someday, there are new signs of engagements, new sites that are coming up for Pakistan. I don't know where it would end, but we can discuss a lot on this thing, and a lot of efforts have been made by India to de-radicalize youth within India, outside India. But yes, one thing we can note that after this much hyped surgical strikes happened in Pakistan and those overt fighter plane operations that happened in Pakistan on terror training sites,
ইতিমধ্যে যে দেখিয়েছে
there has been statistically evident decline of terror activities in India, specifically from the Pakistani side. So we can see some changes, but we cannot make a judgment at the moment because it is too soon to make a judgment to arrive to a conclusion. The other point is the change in the status of Kashmir within India from autonomous state to union territory. This also has changed the internal dynamics within Kashmir, within Pakistan. Pakistan is trying to exploit the sentiments in Kashmir, but has not yet been able to, of course, due to geopolitical changes, to exploit the opportunity on the international stages. But it has been able to some extent recruit a couple of more terrorists within the Kashmir, but the desired results are not coming up even for Pakistan. So this is a kind of situation which is in flux at the moment, and results are awaited. It will take some time to assess what actually is the result of the change in the status of Kashmir within India, and what happens after the Afghan peace deal is struck. That is very important here because on Thursday only 400 prisoners, Taliban prisoners, and they were actually the stalwarts of terror in the region, have been released. Now what happens? Fingers crossed here. We'll look after the. We'll have to assess. Means after all these pictures become very clear. So I'll invite elaboration by Dr. Wolf on the Afghan and the Kashmir issue also, because he might be tracking, and this will be giving a new perspective to us. So thank you, Dr. Islam. I'll take questions because I have not many things to say, but I'll focus on very brief points. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your presentation. This is wonderful, very informative. And now this is a session for question and answer. We have received a good number of very fantastic questions, which I would like to share you with by screen sharing, and then I will pick one or two questions, and after that I would like to request both of you to respond to those questions. So as can be seen here, that there are many questions, out of which I chose initially 4 questions for 2 of you, and after that we will go for rest of the questions if we have time. So the first question we would like to come up with this Sadhanath Kundu. What he said is that what types of benefits are availed by the government of Pakistan from the terrorism activities? So Dr. Wolf, would you first go with this question, and after that we could ask Dr. Rishra as well. Well, please unmute your mic.
Okay, sorry. I mean, what kind of benefits? It's always difficult to talk about benefits in this context. I would think it's just a matter of country uses proxies. The issue is proxies gives Pakistan the opportunity to destabilize India. And we have to think about what are the aims of Pakistan. The aims of Pakistan is to destabilize Kashmir, to destabilize India, to trade, to provoke restrictive reaction of India, to portray India as a restrictive state. This is a typical playbook of Pakistan, and yet this is some of the issues. And of course, Pakistan knows that conventional manner they don't have any chance against it. So this is why they use proxy. For similar reasons, they use proxies also in other states. But Will we continue with another question or?
Regarding Dr. Mr., do you have any response regarding this question? Like, is there any benefit, what sort of benefit Pakistan could achieve through this terrorism?
It actually hoped to achieve a lot of benefit, but it couldn't. The fact remains that this is Pakistan has lost a lot, which it cannot see due to its fanaticism, or we can call it policy fanaticism, or from the other front we can call it religious fanaticism, or the fanaticism with respect to hating India, because the whole foundation of Pakistan itself was the basis, or the foundation of Pakistan itself was against India. It defines itself, which means in opposition to India. So until and unless it changes that foundational definition, it will remain there, and it will keep losing on various fronts.
So I think Dr. Wall would like to say a few words about it.
Yes, I just want to share one view with you, open for discussion. I know it's very provocative, not provocative, it's when you go into the Pakistani mindset, they have two threat perceptions. One threat perception is India. But what India mostly forgets sometimes, not only India, but I mean India is well aware about this, but in particular when you talk to Western experts, they don't understand that the real threat perception, Pakistani security mindset is Afghanistan. See, how I explain it to myself is India is something like this ideal enemy, ideal enemy which fits well into the ideology. So it's perfect for the military to justify the budget, the military budget, everything. So, but when it comes to the concrete threat, because Pakistan knows India would never really attack seriously Pakistan. There was never ever, we had this Bangladesh. So, but this, India had no chance. So, but India never really invaded or intruded core Western Pakistan territory. So, but what Pakistan has always in their mind is they have a disputed border with Afghanistan, and there's a two question. So this is much more in their minds. This is a really certain we should consider. This is why there are always this idea about strategic depth in Afghanistan and why they want to get involved.
Well, in regard to this question, I have few words to say, to share with you. So I believe that the Pakistani political elites, from the very outset of the state, like from 1947 onwards, they have always two strategies to survive, or for their own regime survival. That is to say, like the Islam, they always want to say like the Islam under danger. So therefore, this is our responsibility to protect it. And though they are not very pious, for example, the military elites, like in 1971, in the Liberation War of Bangladesh, they are committing lots of heinous crime, which cannot commit by a Muslim or any people, sensible people. But they were doing so, but in the name of Islam. So they always have a fear, or at least try to promote that Islam is under danger. And the second thing, they are very much concerned, like considering always India as the enemy state, what I call India phobia. So then India phobia is basically their surviving strategy for like military elites and so on. Therefore, this is the only benefit of the Pakistan as a state, as a very problematic state, I would rather say. And particularly for the political elites, military elite, for them particularly. And they want to utilize this for their own survival strategy. So, yeah, so that is my argument basically. Perhaps we can go on. Sorry?
This negative state identity building.
So next point, next question is about, I hope that you can see it now, to Dr. Wolf. If Pakistan is an epicenter of terrorism, could it be said that China is the center of terrorism, which remains safe after projecting terror policies, and the whole South Asia suffer from these radical activities?
Yeah, I have a very strict opinion on this topic. For me, it's despite the fact it is a very interesting topic for further research. China's relationship to jihadism. I mean, on one side, of course, China is facing jihadist threat, but on the other side, we have many occasions in which, for example, China is protecting Pakistani-based terrorists, giving diplomatic support. So then one of my colleagues, she did a major research project on this came out during the time of Corona, that we have hundreds of Chinese scholars in Iran, in madrasas, studying Quran and everything. So we have to really identify China's approach to this sector. We have also to understand is that China was able to have, I don't want to say good relationship, but at least some kind of working relationship with the Taliban regime. Yeah. So the issue that China is some kind of Asian spearhead against, Anglo Asian spearhead against Islamists, forget it's not true. You know? So there's some ambivalence, and this we have to observe. Yeah? China relationship to Iran, what is China's interest in Afghanistan? Of course, why is China protecting Pakistan-based?
Yeah. So thank you. I think Dr. Mishra, in his presentation at the beginning, he said something about Chinese involvement in the eastern part of India. So do you like to add something with regard to this question?
Because there is a conceptual issue with the question also, because I again say that state terror and state-sponsored terrorism are two different things. In that sense, we see that China could be again be involved in the region with using its proxies, actually that are available within India and other parts of the region. Because given the latest standoff or actually ongoing standoff that we are having in Ladakh region, and even in Dokla in 2017, and the kind of responses and the standoffs that are happening within China and India, and the kind of strategy that and the kind of cooperation that is emerging between China and Pakistan, geopolitical cooperation in terms of Kashmir as well as in terms of management of India-China border also, because nobody can deny if something a brigade moves into the Gilgit-Baltistan region, Pakistani brigade moves, and here there is something happening in Ladakh from the Chinese side. It's easy to link, at least theoretically. There is a possibility, there is a degree of possibility of cooperation with regard to Kashmir between China and Pakistan. So in that sense, China, if there is a possibility of China emerging as a new sponsor of terror in the region, specifically with respect to India, from the perspective of India. Northeastern region, we have recently seen a couple of firings and bombings again in northeastern region by the Naga militants. So there could be a link and possibility, not to deny.
Thank you very much. So, in other words, there is a difference between the Pakistan as well as the China as a state-sponsored terrorism, with regard to state-sponsored terrorism in South Asia. Thank you. And now the next question actually is about, can white terror be called state-sponsored terrorism? Should people resort to raid terror when the cognitive cruelty of the rulers flout to the rule of law and scrupulously undermine the constitution? This question is from Pravir Kranti. Power this today's discussion. Just can ignore this question and then can go to the next question. So, to this question to the Dr. Mishra, how do you conceive the inclination between Pakistan and China and new assertive stance of Nepal in the neighborhood in South Asia? Is Nepal slowly becoming a new space inclined to states known to be manufacturing state terrorism?
I don't see any new possibility or Nepal being state sponsoring terror sponsoring state. But of course, earlier Pakistan has been using Nepal as a route to terrorize India, means for its terror operation. Not only Nepal but other countries also are being used as a route to India or into India. But with regard to China-Nepal equations, I would say that this is not related to the topic first, but if I have to give an opinion, China is actually trying to use Nepal, especially for dispensation power. But actually, if Nepal inclines towards China the way China wants, it won't be possible for Nepal to remain a normal state. That will be a problem. So my assessment says that Nepal will again try to recalibrate, or the internal political forces in Nepal will recalibrate themselves, because already internal tussles and negotiations have started within the Communist Party itself. So the jury is out. We don't hope anything is, and Nepal becoming a new terror sponsoring state, and I don't foresee it.
Yes. Thank you very much for clarification. So, should we go for one more question or should we end our session here?
There was another question about this Islam being monolith. I never consider Islam as a monolith. And just as Hinduism is not a monolith. There are diversities, but yes, some sentiments, sectional sentiments are there, which we know as extremists or terrorists.
Yeah, please, Dr.
Yeah, when we are in the final wrap up tool now, I don't know in your but okay, it was linked to this Pakistan. We should really, for India support is to have more to look what's going on in Afghanistan. And there India has to make such a talking of Indian issues, concerns, how India will, what is the new policy of India in Afghanistan? I mean, what you have to think about what's going on now. Can you debate many factors which we don't know. Election in the United States by Trump will be effectiveness on the withdrawal of troops, and what is security about Indian assets, Indian development projects in Afghanistan. So, and I think when we talk about the context of state terrorism, we have to see the need for Indian stronger Indian involvement in Afghanistan. I'm not talking about military, I'm talking about diplomatic involvement. Perhaps even more development project even might be more difficult now with this twin perspective on from the Iranian, Chinese context. I think there's a stronger need to do more. Just like Afghanistan more in the context of state terrorism and as a proxy conflict area between India and Pakistan. This is one thing. And the second thing is we don't know what's going on, how far Afghan Taliban will stick to promises of the peace talks. I don't think much that Afghan Taliban will completely cut off ties with Al-Qaeda, if they can do. We have increasing incorporation of coherence between different Taliban shuras. We have an increasing leverage Haqqani network of ISIS fighters in Afghanistan. And there's still some strong desire to move this ISIS out of Afghanistan, and which means this has a strong impact on Kashmir. So, what is good news for Afghanistan perhaps might be bad news for India. So there is a strong tendency, strong likelihood that we have a major shift foreign fighters who get bounced out of Afghanistan to Kashmir.
Well,
So, and to be a really for India to take into consideration.
Dr. Mishra, would you like to add something?
Well, I like his perspective. This is in any case going to be a bad news for India, because I really see again the realist folly that happened in 1979 onwards. So the realist folly is happening again, means Taliban, US, which was not supposed to negotiate with terrorists, is negotiating with it. And the ultimate benefactor may be US for a while, because it wants to move out from Afghanistan. That's one thing. And of course, that might be good in the sense that some of the geopolitical great geopolitical influence are out, but still fingers crossed, because one of the sections in Pakistan is worried or suspicious, because it has always been fighting against the Taliban, and Taliban again could take it as another victory for them. The jury is out again. Of course, bad news for India in any case, whatever happens there, because India has been out from the talks. Only some kind of tangential engagement remains. The imperative is India should engage with Afghanistan, and it is trying to engage with Afghanistan in all other fronts, except military. Military in the sense boots on ground. It's training Afghanistan through just supplying some of these small equipment and weapons, but not actual military reinforcement from India. Given in the civilian context, it's already there. It's trying to go bigger, but the problem
is not a democratic country since very beginning. As long as this government system of the country changes itself, it would always remain as a trouble for the rest of the country. So how could we get it over? Like in that case, what as a Bangladeshi or as a scholar in politics and international relations, my expectation is that Indian foreign policy needs to be more proactive in the regional context, particularly like in South Asian countries, including Afghanistan. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for us, not only for India, I'm saying like for the rest of the countries, to have the stability in the region. I said, like once again, I'd like to repeat that it is really very unfortunate to be the neighbor of country like Pakistan, as we know that country today. So therefore, we expect more proactive foreign policy from India. So I think this is a time to wrap up our session. Once again, I would like to thank you very much, and I would like to the Department of Political Science, Bidan Chandra College, affiliated with University of Kolkata, and its all the faculty members and everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Salam. It was nice meeting you. It's so nice meeting you all.
You too.
And thank you to our organizers that they gave me this platform. Thank you.
So, thank you, Professor Mohammad Mozaikul Islam for chairing this session, and would also like to thank Dr. Sigbright Wool and Dr. Saurabh Mishra for their wonderful deliberations. Now, as we all know, we are going to wrap up this program very soon. So I will kindly request Professor Prashant Kumar Sharma, is the Assistant Professor of the Department of Political Science, Bidan Chandra College, Rishra, to deliver the vote of thanks. And with that, we'll end. And before that, I have an announcement to make that is regarding the feedback form. The feedback form will be provided in the WhatsApp group that has been created for this webinar. So all the participants will get the feedback form the link for the feedback form in the WhatsApp group.